Lord, good to see us in church. You know, some the seasons and the times that we are in, kupatikana kanisa ni ngumu, mambo ni mengi, all right? Mambo ni mengi, shughuli ni nyingi. So Sunday most probably is the only day for some of us that you can rest. So we appreciate seeing you. Tunashukuru sana tukiwaona kanisani. Yes, at least Pastor Dorina and the rest of us in the pastoral, we get to be encouraged, all right? So happy new month. Would you just get a neighbor if you have, and you just say happy new month to them? If you know this is the month of love. This is the month of love. So kama kama uko peke yako, kama posti ya stima, upendo wa Yesu. Upendo wa Yesu wanizunguka. That is the theme song of the month for me. So, but kama umefanikiwa, God bless you too. Hata tusikie vibaya. All right, but I'm happy to be the one speaking today and bring the word today through Pasi. He gave me the opportunity, and I'm grateful. And just to start us off, I think what is our theme this year, or what is our theme? Launching out into the deep. Now let's say it like a minute. What is our theme? Now, for starters, I think if you are like me, for me, themes hold a special place in my life. I was sharing with the first service that there's a challenge that I've taken over the past few years. Zenye zimepita. Sikuanza kitambo, ni juzi tu. And the challenge that I took is that every time Pasi comes and shares the vision with us, or the revelation of the theme, that I have taken it personally and asked myself, what does it mean for me personally? You know, at times it can be a far-fetched idea. Inaweza kuwa tu ni ya huko tu, tunasema, what is our theme? Launching out into the deep. Ukitoka pale, you are on the shallows, okay? But it is just a challenge that I gave myself, and I have seen it to work. Why? For a number of reasons. Last year our theme was kuna wale wanasonga wakisonga. All right, so our theme last year was making room for more. And for me, I feel launching out into the deep is a build-up of last year. Like whatever God had started to work out in my life, it is continuing even this year. That God is doing even greater things. And the reason why I was saying it is important and what has worked for me, it's because I believe that this is not just an idea or a nice slogan that Pasi shares with us so that tuonekane kanisa yetu. By the way, we'll be the odd one out if we don't have a theme of the year, all right? But he does not do that for the sake of, but he does that with the hope and thought that all of us, or most of us, will take it as a prophecy and revelation in our lives. And what I have found to work is that if it is a prophecy and revelation, only the spiritual discerning will get it, all right? Only the spiritual discerning will get it. If your spiritual antenna imesimama, ndio utaipata. But kama yako kidogo, ni zile radio za kitambo ulikuwa unazungusha, you know, Mercy maybe, but yeah, all right, you tune, you're trying to tune it so that you get to the frequency. If your spiritual antenna is not high, you will not get it. So the challenge that I'd like to begin or to introduce myself or my message today is giving you a challenge to ask yourself this question if you're taking the note. That what does launching into the deep mean for me personally? I know Pasi has shared amesema, and he has shared the vision, 10,000 souls and so much church plants and everything else. Wow, what an incredible vision. And it is possible. Tell your neighbor it is possible. But now that is for the church, and it is good. What is your vision for yourself, for your life, launching out into the deep? What are you hearing God say to you? One of the things that Sam likes doing with us, the worship team, is that he teaches us that we are able as believers to hear God for ourselves. That you do not need a man of God. You need a man of God, but there's a place for a man of God, but you can also hear God for yourself. Because when Christ died, the curtains were torn into meaning that every one of us can get to experience God for yourself. And you can launch deeper in your relationship with God and hear him for yourself and hear him tell you what does he want for your life personally. What does he want you to achieve? What does he want to achieve through you? So take that challenge. Think about it. But whereas now let's go back to Njiru. I think I've been thinking about it and it will inform the message that I'll bring to us today. But for me, for starters, is the illustration there. What is the blue thing that is there? Water, all right? So kama we ni kama mimi na usinue mkono na usindushie mawe, maji kipita karai, wachana nayo, all right? So I get overwhelmed. I get overwhelmed by the sight of a lot of water. Najua kuswim, naenda naingisha to miguu and I'm good, all right? So, but basically, a lot of water, or a large water body excites me, ikiwa mbali, but nikikaribia, it brings anxiety and fear. And so if you think deeply about what the theme means, it means us being immersed into the water and going into the deep. Now, those that know, and if all of us I know you know, that if you are to get into an ocean or get into the deep, there are those things, equipments that you will need for you to do deep sea diving. Sindio? Kuna the oxygen tanks and everything else, you'll need that for you to survive there. Why is it so? Because it is an unfamiliar ground. All right? Is it? Yes, an unfamiliar ground or place. All right? It is a place where you yourself, oh, you want to preach with me? Okay. Yes. All right, so it is an unfamiliar place or ground. It is a place that you're not used to. Now, if you are to think about it, most of us, tukitembea, I ask you, if when you're walking around, how many pay attention to your walking style, to usigongo, usiteguke? Yani, you walk naturally. Is that not so? We walk naturally because these are familiar. We are on familiar grounds. But if we are to be put, yes, if we are to be put in what? In water, all right? If we are to be put in water, because it's an unfamiliar place, then we will need special equipments. We will need special things for us to survive under that space. And now, that takes me back again to launching out into the deep. For us to launch into the deep, there are special things or equipments that we'll need for us to be equipped to survive there. So I want to begin by taking us back to the thought of launching out into the deep. Now again, the final thought that I have for my intro is, I don't know how many of us, now this one you can lift up your hands, all right? How many of us have made year's resolution or goals? Ama muli give up on this thing, bwana. You know, I saw a meme online that watu wasiseme mwaka ni yao, all right? The last time he said mwaka ni yako kilikuramba. So now basically don't fear, bwana, all right? Sawa basi, don't lift up your hand basi. But basically, I think at me, I am there, but I have tried. At least I have some resolutions. And part of the things that I have made, I will not share with you all of them, but things that God has led me to put are great. Are just ideas. They are dreams. For the lack of a better word, they are dreams. They are dreams that I can only trust God to help me fulfill. So there is a fun fact. Tell your neighbor a fun fact. The first fun fact that I want, or interesting fact that I want to bring to us, is that God always delights in impossibilities. All right, repeat that after me. God always delights in impossibilities. So basically, when you follow the pattern of the Bible, many stories zenye tunapenda, usiniambie ni gani ama usishare na neighbor, but you know that favorite story yenye unapenda, one of the things that excites you about it is about the impossibility and how God works in it. Mungu ni Mungu mwenye akiona whatever, like there's an impossibility, inamuexcite. Inamtia joto. I don't know what excites you, but for God, he delights in impossibilities. And today, I've titled my message, Launching into the Deep, and then, venturing into impossibilities. Venturing into impossibilities, things that seem to be impossible. Things zenye ukiangalia in your own eyes and in your own sight, they don't seem to make sense. God delights in those. And these are the moments that he uses to draw us closer to him, to show his power to us, to have an intimate and deep relationship with us. So in today's sermon, we are going to talk about what it means to launch into the deep and to venture into impossibilities, and how God calls us to do exactly that. So I'd like to turn, to just tell us to turn to theme verse, Luke chapter 5. Luke chapter 5. I'll read from verse 1 and actually go all the way to 8. Luke chapter 5, verse 1 to 8. And of course, the background context is that Jesus was calling his first disciples. So I'll read. One day, I'm reading from the NIV. One day, as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, the people were crowding round him and listening to the word of God. He saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by fishermen who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little from the shore. Then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we've worked all night and haven't caught anything, but because you say so, I will let down the nets." When they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. Verse 8, when Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knee and said, "Go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." All right. For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken, and so were James and John and the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. Now, for some of us know there's like a song that was trending, is it last year or last year but one? Shusha Nyavu, all right? And of course it was trending for the wrong things, but if you know, you know, but that's beside the point. And so maybe we can try and sing. I don't know the chorus well, but we can try. So it goes, Bwana mkubwa. Bwana mkubwa. Nasikia yani, you know, it's amazing. Let me post for you two mnangoja kushusha nyavu. All right? And that happens in concerts where you're just with torch and everything and flashlights, but ojui lyrics. But anyway, we'll talk about that. So the song was trending. Now you know where the verse, where the song comes from. But here we find Jesus calling his first disciples. And there are interesting things that I want to take us through that I see. And first of all is that Jesus, of course, was in his business preaching and doing ministry when he meets or when he goes to the place where Simon Peter and John were, and they were fishing, okay? So, but basically, I know humanly thinking, the first thought that I had when I read this was, if I was Jesus, humanly speaking, I would start by the miracle first, and then follow by the preaching, all right? Why? Because it will attract crowd, all right? Pate washirika, all right? To preach to. But of course, Jesus does not do that. I find it interesting how Jesus is able to just put the main thing first and then later on. Because he had the opportunity to do that. He could have started with that. Or even he could have showed up last night when akina Peter walikuwa naenda kwa maji na nini. But I don't think it would have made much essence or make a lot of sense. But fast forward, so he comes to them, and then of course, after the preaching, after teaching, now he focuses on the frustration of akina Peter, and he sees, jama, but they were frustrated. And you can imagine how frustrated they were, because wamekuwa wakijaribu kufish all night, and they did not get anything. You can imagine, all night umekosa usingizi and everything else, frustration. And now change it. You know, sometimes we read the Bible as a far-fetched idea. Now imagine, uko kwa biashara yako, nikota kutaja Dan, but sitamtaja. All right, so sasa uko hapo kwa duka and you are selling. Siku mzima bwana mkubwa haujapata kitu. Like hakuna mtu amekuja hata kuuliza bei ya sukari or anything. You can imagine the frustration that they were going through. Or even now, have you done, of course, you can put it in your own. Maybe ni masomo. I was a student and I'm planning to go back this year. And I know that there are times that you can venture into the deep, bana. But usiku mzima, hakuna kitu. You can imagine the frustration that they were in as Jesus was coming to them. But when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Humanly thinking, ukifikiria, we kama we ndio Peter, what would be your first thought? Would it come with excitement? Would it come with excitement? No, you would not, because you've done that. So what is new? What new thing is going to happen this time? So, and I can imagine the frustration. We've done this. And then Jesus himself was not a fisherman. And then these fishermen, of course, they were experienced in their own way. Wamekuwa kifanya kitu over and over again. Again, going back and bring it back home is to your place, business or school. You have been doing it over and over again. You know your way around things. You do not need to ask questions. If it is an office ama ni mahali pa kazi, unajua ukiingia asubuhi, mtaratara ni gani kutoka asubuhi mpaka jioni. But then again, Jesus is saying, okay, I know. Okay, he does not tell them I know, but he tells them, try again. Try again, and this time, do it with me. Simon answered, "Master," verse 5, "we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so," repeat after me, "but because you say so, I will let down the nets." And I think for me, it's a wow moment that Nisawa. I think it's just amazing to know that Simon Peter had done it, and they were frustrated, but they're like, okay. And actually, by this time, when they are going to fish, I'm imagining si Masaya ko fish. So it is so basically the odds are, I don't know what odds are there, but the odds are not for them, okay? But yet they do what? What I get is obedience. Obedience. That just because you say this, Lord, I don't know what you mean, I don't know what you're thinking, I don't know what your voice is, I'm trying to understand you, but because it is you, I will do it. Because ni wewe umeniambia, I will lower down the nets, and they do so. And of course, when they do so, of course, we know what happens in verse 6. When they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. The moment they allowed God now to be in the plan, the moment waliitikisha Mungu sasa akuje afanye kazi na wao, to fish with them, something changed. Something changes, and that's the same thing. That the moment we invite God, in those moments when he's asking us to cast our nets into the deep, there is a difference with that. So they signaled to their partners to come and help them. But then again, verse 8 is the last thing that I'll share from that, then I get into my notes, is when Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knee and said, "Go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." Now that's a change of scenario. What would we expect after neti zina nini? Utaanza kurepent ama utaanza kushukuru ukijaribu kutoka ukauze? Okay, I know mnaniangalia, but all holy saints, maybe you will start repenting like Simon Peter. But I think that's a turn of events. And it drives me to the thought that the more we get into a deeper and intimate relationship with God, the more we realize our flaws and our sins. Isaiah writes and says, "Oh, unto me," venye alipata revelation badala ya kukua excited and everything else, what does? His heart is broken. And he says, "Oh, unto me, for I am a man of and clean lips." So the more we get closer to God, aside from the many miracles that he will perform in our lives and the things that he will do for us, is that we get to realize how broken we are before him. And it breaks us. And it breaks us. So, but the first thing, of course, the first point that I want to bring to us is the call to venture into the deep. The call to venture into the deep is for every one of us. Kila mtu ameitiwa. Hii ni wito ya kila mtu to venture into the deep. Through our theme, our verse and theme, we have been called to venture into the deep. So when Jesus spoke to Simon Peter and the other fishermen, they had just spent the entire night trying to catch fish without success. They had done all that they knew, frustrated as they were, and they were very frustrated. In fact, they were exhausted and discouraged. Exhausted and discouraged. And we can get there at times on our relationships, maybe things that we are trying to make work. Relationships in different sectors and in different, again, I say this is the month of love. So maybe you are trying to make things work in your relationship, in your marriage, and things are not quite working out. It can be exhausting and discouraging. And yet Jesus tells them, now the disciples, to go back and cast their nets into the deep waters. He tells them, try again. Try again. Come. I know, my sister, you've tried it, you've done it, but come, try again. I know, my brother, you've done it. I know it's frustrating. You don't even want to see this person or get to anything to do with this thing, but come, let's try again. Now consider this. Jesus wasn't a fisherman, and neither was Simon at the time. Jesus was asking them to do something that appeared completely unreasonable. In fact, from a logical standing point, going into deeper water after a night of fruitless labor seemed like a waste of time. And it might seem to us like a waste of time, going back and doing the same thing over and over again. But sometimes, God calls us to do things that seem impossible in our natural understanding. In our natural understanding, he will tell you, do this, or come and join me in this. There's a nice book called Experiencing God that we were using with the last Form 4 leavers last year. And one of the greatest lessons that I got is that one of the God's invitation to us always leads us to a crisis of belief. That God's invitation to join him at his work and what he's doing always leaves us at a crisis of belief. There is a crisis of belief because unajaribu kuangalia, but you can't connect, or you cannot make two and two join together. One of my favorite sermons that I heard a while back from an amazing speaker is a message that he had titled "The Great Disconnect," and that still lingers on in my mind. That sometimes the things that God is calling us to, and the things and the current reality, kuna ni story mbili different. There's a great disconnect between where we are at and where God is calling us to be. Abraham, a man that I'm looking forward to meeting in heaven, to pick a story and aniambie story ilikuwa aje. All right? I want to just know what inspired him to be called the man of faith. The man of faith, because of just believing in God. He's told about these wonderful things. God comes and shares the wonderful promises over his life, but there's a great disconnect because the man anaambia about many descendants, as many as the stars. Hata yeye mwenyewe hana an heir, hana mtoto wake mwenyewe. So there's a great disconnect between where God was, where Abraham was, and what God was leading him to. But him being a faithful God, it all came to pass. So God calls us to do things that seem impossible in our natural understanding. God doesn't always make sense to our human logic. He doesn't follow the script that we write for him. He calls us to venture into deep places of faith, deep waters, to step out with everything and not to hold back. The scripture reference that I have for that is Isaiah 55 verse 8 to 9. Isaiah chapter 55 verse 8 to 9. And the NIV version says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts." That when you think you've got it figured out and you've seen it all, those are your thoughts. God's thoughts are higher. God's plans are higher. Maybe you're sticking there and you are umekaza shingo. I repeat something that I said a while back when I was again preaching here, is that one of the frustrating things that we find ourselves as Christians or believers is when tumekaza shingo. When God is trying to tell us, go to the right, but umekaza unataka left. Now what happens is, God being in his own very unique nature, he will wait for you. He will wait for you, uache kukaza shingo, to turn your head to the other direction where he's trying to call you, because his ways are better and his plans for us are better. So when we think about that, God's plans for us often leads us into places that seem impossible. But those are the very places where we experience his miraculous provision. Those are the very places that we experience his miraculous provision. One of the things that I'll share personal testimony is, of course, about my younger brother. And so, fast forward, both of them actually for this story, their rite of passage were a miracle to me. So, because I kind of take care of most of the things in our family, so that was my responsibility to take care of them. So the first one, of course, I'll not share, but it happened miraculously. But the second one was even of a greater miracle. So when wengine wanashangaa younger brother, now my sister's kid, all right? So I call him my brother because, of course, many things tumelelewa. So when it was his time to go through rite of passage, of course, I didn't have the finances to take him aende akapitishwe kwa nini akasalimie daktari. But then again, the pressure was, my mom was like, and mothers, well, mothers are just amazing. My mom has, when we say belief, the belief that and trust that my mom has on me is at 110%. So yetu ako like, anaenda, sawa. Yetu anajua anaenda, hajui ataenda aje. But anyway, here I am, Njiru, just the little man there, wondering, this man, ama nichukue kitu nijifanyie. But anyway, I'm like, how hard can it be, But I'm seated there, and of course, I'm making a joke out of it because now it's fast. But I'm there and I'm just disillusioned. I'm like, what is going to happen? We're already in December. The young man is excited that he's going through rite of passage. So you can imagine going to him and telling him, sasa, utajoin mwaka ingine moja tu, tukutane hiyo ingine. Angetaka kusikia hiyo story. But long story short is that God, I think, just came through in a way. I told God, God, I've done this over and over again. Last year's, or was it last year? The other one's rite of passage was a miracle. So hata hii nimekuachia. A long story short, God provided. I got a friend. I didn't have to do it myself, thank God. So now I got a friend who is a doctor, and he said, just bring the young man. I will work on him. Wewe tu ujue venye atafika na atarudi na muangalie. I was like, what? How would that been possible? How would that have been possible if I just didn't? Because it was just purely faith. It was not finances or anything. And these are just some of the instances that maybe I might share in this sermon of how God is able to just look at our state of being in a corner and impossibilities and come and manifest his glory and provision. So maybe God has allowed you into that corner because he's waiting on you to call on him. But as long as you are trying to figure it out, Enjo Gabriel, bado wanazunguka. Okay, mpe time tu. Wanasonga hii side nyingine. So unazunguka unajaribu and then you're frustrated. But the point that I'm bringing is that the call to venture into the deep and into impossibilities will need faith to just work on that. But the second thing is exactly connected to what I've said, and it is responding in faith to the impossible. Responding in faith to the impossible. That when you're caught in between the corners, you don't know where to go. Your rent is due and other things, and the landlord anakutisha. You're just there, and you have to awaken faith. In the first service, I was sharing with them, and I was telling them that the other thing again, now for this year, for the Form 4 leavers, we've changed the devotional book, and we are doing even an amazing book called Mizizi. So if you happen to get across it, please, you can interact with it. So Mizizi is a nice mini book, and one of the things that we are learning so far is about faith. And the author says that faith is a muscle, all right? So everyone, do this, because if you look at my muscle, you'll be disappointed, all right? So now, so faith is a muscle. The more the more you work out, the more it builds up, all right? The more unataka kuunga, the more you have to put it into work. The more you have to just put it into work. And how many are the times, now I give this challenge to us, now, and this one is an ouch moment, so prepare for it. But how many of us are obese in faith? Okay? Do you know what I mean by obese in faith? You don't actually put it to work. You prefer tu kukaa hapo. Kunaona tu kunenepa kufanya nini? Hapo tu, we tu uko sawa tu, hivyo. But God is saying we have to respond in faith to the impossible. We have to work the muscle. Work the muscle like Njiru, and you will be better. And you'll begin to build up your muscle and spiritual muscle. So Simon Peter, going back to Luke, our text, Simon Peter, though doubtful, obeyed Jesus. He said, "Master, we have worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I will let down the nets," and that's faith at its core. Obedience, even when it doesn't make sense. That you have an assignment and a task like I had, and you're like, "Wow, God, I don't know how this is going to work out, but I choose to have faith and to obey that you are faithful." The impossible happens when we act in faith, even when the situations seem beyond our control. I'll repeat that. The impossible happens when we act in faith, even when the situation seems to be beyond our control, even when it seems like you are caught in between and you don't know what happens or what will happen. Again, another testimony that I had that is connected to this and faith is last year I happened to graduate, and it was tough. Oh, it was tough. I think, again, I salute all those people that are in school and those that have now actually graduated, because it is hectic in its own way. It's the last minute, and we are the lists of the graduates is being released. Your name is not there. Ni kama ya mbinguni, hakuna jina yako. Hey, unapatwa na wasiwasi. Unapatwa na wasiwasi. Sleepless nights. You can't rest. I know those that have graduated know it, because that is the time missing marks appear. And that is the time lecturers move to other countries. You can't find them. That is the time the admin is busy and now cannot answer your call. Well, it was tough, just to say the least. So I remember, I think I shared that prayer item a couple of times in the fellowship. Everywhere I was, even in the worship team, kwambia kiwoi niekeni tu kwa maombi. Juu hapa ni Mungu. It's almost to the deadline, like tumepewa deadline. Deadline inafika, najua ni kesho, jina yangu bado short story. So, and I remember at that time, I am like, and of course now let me share a fun fact is that, of course, I was sponsored, and having my sponsor being connected, you know who I am talking about. So I thought, again, atafanya ile kitu bwana. Si atafanya ile kitu. Piga simu bwana, tisha hawa watu, hii kitu itoke. Of course, but him being a good mentor, he did not interfere. But I suffered. But anyway, he did not interfere with the process. So he allowed me to be molded. He allowed me to experience that, and my faith to be stretched, my faith muscle to be stretched. So, of course, it's the last final day, and I can see I'm calling, and then the deadline, obviously, ikafika, tukaambiwa now, kama hauyuko, jaribu next year. Machozi. Wanaume hatuliangi lakini bwana. So it really weighed down my heart. And then now the funny thing is, after I had worked all the units, missing marks zime add up, the last one was internship. Now what was happening to the internship report is that our chaplain was saying, ati wewe ulisema ni nani tena? But mwalimu tulikuwa heartbreak. Hanikumbuki. And then the thing that happened, I had dropped the papers in school, but unfortunately he was not the one who picked. It was the secretary. So now I had to hope that the secretary the school secretary alifikisha. But long story short, zilipatikana finally. But that was an intense time of stretching of my faith. I couldn't see it happen. I was caught in impossibilities, but it was a high mountain that I had to face. So this story reminds me of the story of David and Goliath. David, a young shepherd boy, is supposed to face Goliath. And you know, again, Tena, we usually read his stories of Bible kama stories za Jaba, you know, ama stories za Afro, DJ Afro, Ziko uko tu. But to bring it close, can you imagine yourself? I know all of us are big, all right, in our own way. But now you can think of your size and status, and now facing, I don't know how Goliath looked like, but he must have been huge and whatever else. So, and even the king and his men, hawange faced Goliath, everyone else was disillusioned. So David, a young shepherd boy, faced a giant warrior, a Goliath. Everyone else saw an impossibility, but David saw an opportunity for God to display his power. In 1 Samuel chapter 14, verse 45, David boldly declares, "You come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty." He didn't back down, even when the odds seemed overwhelmingly impossible. And that is the same challenge. So maybe, and there's a song that I love, the song says, "I may not face Goliath, but I've got my own giants." All right? You can repeat that after me. I may not face Goliath, but I've got my own giants. So there will be those giants that God will expose you to. Not because he's not able to remove them from your life. Not because he's not able to do it and to give you an easy time and to just do things like my mentor and be able to pull some strings and you'll get the paper faster. But he allows you, your character, to be formed. And in those moments, we need to respond in faith to the impossible. And finally, my third point is that the miraculous results of obedience. The miraculous results of obedience. What happens when we obey? There is a miracle. When Simon Peter let down his nets, they caught so many fish that the nets began to break. When they decided to obey, there was an overflow. When they decided to obey, mambo ikabadilika, mambo ikachemka, and now things changed. He had to call for help, and together they filled 2 boats with fish. May God do the same for you, even in your place where you're waiting on him. May he just come through for you in your obedience to him and your time of faith, and may he increase whatever you are toiling over the night and over the years and waiting on him for. I pray that he will do that, if only we would obey. What was impossible in human terms became possible with God's intervention. Peter had a personal encounter with a miracle that day. And that's what happens when you obey. When you choose to step out in faith and from fear and say, "God, I don't know how this circumstance is going to turn out. I don't know what deep means to me." Or maybe you've said, "This is what deep means to me." Maybe you want me to venture into this. Maybe it's someone that you have been praying for. I think that is one of my deeps, all right? One of my deeps is I have a person or people that have been praying and believing God to change. And that at times it can get discouraging. Like Simon Peter, umeomba, umemwongelesha, umefanya nini? And he seems like he's getting there. Then when he seems he's there, anarudi nyuma. So you can get there, but even then, when you obey, there's a miracle. Ephesians chapter 3, verse 20. Ephesians chapter 3, verse 20, a common scripture to us, maybe to some of us. It says, now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us. The power is at work within us. So meaning it's not outside you, it's not something that is far-fetched, it is within you. So that takes me back to the thought that we are our own hindrances to the blessings of God. That we are the ones that do not put in the work. We want it easy. You know, one of the thoughts or lies that has been passed around is that God's miracles existed in the biblical times and ended then. They don't exist right now. But it is a lie, and it is a lie from the pits of hell. Even today, the miracles are here for today. Maybe someone else's miracle or issue where they're waiting on God, impossibility, for you might be different. But even then, the power is at work in you. If only we would just result in obedience and tell God, I will obey your word. I will obey and have faith. I will obey what you have said. The promises that you have spoken over my life, I will obey. And I want you, Lord, to see. I want to see where you lead me. So God can go far beyond what we ask or even imagine. And that is the key into launching into the deep. Trusting him even when it feels like we are stepping into the unknown. A testimony again that I have is when I see water, and a lot of water, I was showing the first service, again is the time last year, but one in 2023, when we decided with my team of leadership that we are going to take the teens to Mombasa for a camp. And at first, it sounded like a crazy idea. Kwanza when the leaders come, you know, at times leaders that we work with wanatuweka kwa majaribu. But now they came up with it and we were like, okay. So I said, okay, as the leader, let's do this. And we began planning. And one of the things I'll share in the testimony is that when we did the budget exceeded, I think, I can't remember clearly, so I'll just give an estimate, but it was past half an M, that is 500K. Now, you don't want to know how much money I've handled all my life, or the most money, all right? Hata wewe mwenyewe unarusha mawe, lakini I don't know how much money you've handled, that is your own. So when I looked at this, I was like, God, hey, hata yangu sijawahi shika kama hii. Now this is your ministry, but hata sijui itatoka wapi. And it was crazy. Fast forward, we begin planning, do everything else, roll out the poster, and then with the poster, the leadership again is like, by this we can do a early bird offer. Nico, okay, I listened to the idea. And then the early bird offer, now I forgot to mention, now when we did the budgeting, of course, half of the budget was being met by the teenagers if they were going to faithfully pay. But now here my leaders come and they want an early bird offer, meaning inashuka tena chini. But I was like, sawa. So I said, I'll put a catch. I'll put it very early, or just a few months before the camp, because it will discourage people in a good way, not to pay up. But shock on me. People grabbed the early bird offer, most especially in our church. So, but anyway, they grabbed the early bird, and I had, like, our church had the most attendance, and I think only 3 or 4 paid late bird, the late registration. The rest were early bird. You can now imagine how ni watu wangapi wamenishukishia budget yangu chini. And then now this for the other church. Where? Muscle again. Faith muscle. So the slogan for the camp was Martinez tufike Costo. And so the teens were so excited. Every time tunakutana Martinez tunafika Costo, but mimi kwa mayangu niko good. Mungu naona nikipeleka hawa watu. kwingine. But I'm like, yes, Martinez register, tunafika Coastal. And then fast forward, of course, we went and God provided. Through partnerships and people, we got to meet the rest of the budget. That was one of the testimonies. But the second thing that I've chosen that testimony, it's because I look back at the Coast experience and I see God. Not only in provision, but also in how the events unfolded. Now, all of us have been teenagers. Tuachane kwanza na hiyo. Some of us are parents to teenagers. Tusonge hiyo. Some of us have siblings that have teenagers. You know they can be your worst nightmare and the best dream that you've ever had, like for me. All right, but we went to Coast. I had, of course, capable teen workers, and it was stretching. We did not have, one of the things that I see God is, I was sharing again, is that we were camping. We were camping in tents. Oh, it was amazing, but anyway. So we were camping just close to the ocean. And we didn't have any teenager or case that of misbehavior or who wanted to be a deep sea diver. Because, that one was my greatest fear. We even had to make them sign an agreement. That was how serious it was. Jimmy, I think there's a story, I'm taking too long in my sermon, but anyway, there's a story Percy shared with me about a pastor who planned for a hike somewhere, and they were going to, I don't know what mountain, and then the pastor did not show up for some reasons. He left the team to go with but the unfortunate happened. One of the young people passed because pastor has died because the hire alikuwa na shida, but sasa hawakujua, timu hawakujua. So akienda, so mimi after, of course, that story, nikawa najua, after then Percy told me, I thank God he's not here today, but mom first so, but Percy also scared me. So he told me, ujue anything happens to those kids, unakula cabbage bwana. Unalala ndani. So you need to be careful with those children because they are minors. So that was another thing that I trusted in God, and he did not fail us. And an amazing thing is that one of the nights when we were crossing over, because our camping site was in Likoni and we had to use a ferry to get to the other side. There was a night where now that story that Percy gave happened. I was left in the camping site. Teens are outside with my workers. And so now I had exams, so it was for a good shule again. So now I had exams, so I was left. Teens are out there, they are with my workers. And then the stories I'm hearing, they are coming back in beats. Wanarudi, you know how wanakuja to groups tudogo. Nauliza, wewe watu wako wapi? Wanakuja wako nyuma. Alafu wacha nikwambie teenagers, they are excited. Wacha nikwambie tumevuka na ferry. Au tuko tunavuka in groups juu atutoshei wote. You can imagine. Number one, it's the ferry. Number two, in groups, and it's people are many, they can get lost. So, but God covered me, and God covered us. That is just the point that I'm trying to bring home. That sometimes obedience will get us to such places. That is my own testimony, and I know for you, you have your own, and we can spend the whole day sharing those amazing stories. But God is still calling us to launch even into deeper places. That he wants us to get into deeper places with our relationship with him, with how we experience him. And remember, there's a slogan that I found online that I want to share with you. You can take note of it. And it says, remember that the deep waters are not where you drown. Remember that the deep waters are not where you drown. They are where you discover the fullness of God's power and provision. Those are the places that you're going to discover God's fullness of God's power and provision. And so don't fear when that's the thought I'm bringing to us. Do not fear when you see a lot of water. Do not fear when you hear the word deep. Do not fear when God is saying, come and trust me. Trust me in this. Trust me in this area of provision and providence. Trust me in your workplaces. Trust me in school. Trust me in your loved one and family member getting saved. Trust me in this area. Trust me. Do not fear, because those are not the places where you drown. And God is not calling us to drown or to drown us in those places. But it wants to us to experience his fullness of power. So 4 points that I think are critical, that might be a repetition of what we've discussed, is God calls us to step into the deep. That is the first thing. That God is calling us to step into the deep. I don't know what the deep means to you. Again, I go back to asking. Think about it, reflect about it this week. Ask yourself, what does deep mean for me? What does deep mean for my family? What does deep mean for me as in my ministry? What does deep mean? Because remember what I said, only the spiritual discerning will get to see this. Even the children of the Israelites, not all of them got to see the promised land. Only a few. So now, basically, be among the few. That's what I'm saying. And choose to just reflect and to ask yourself, what does it mean? So don't be afraid to venture into what seems impossible. When God calls you into the deep, he has a purpose in it. But the second thing, obey God even when it doesn't make sense. Even when it doesn't make sense, because it won't make sense. I think, like I said, in the pattern of the Bible, you'll see all those stories. Moses, talk about Abraham, talk about Joseph, talk about who else is your Bible character, Paul himself. So there were moments that God was working with them, but because of their obedience, they were able to experience God. So obey God even when it doesn't make sense. Even when it seems there's a great disconnect between where you are at reality and where you are going. And then the third thing is expect the miraculous. Expect the miraculous. Expect the miraculous to happen. When we launch into the deep in faith, we open doors to God's miracle in our lives, trusting him to do more than you can ever think or ever imagine. So even for those, now I go back, I pause maybe before I share the fourth and the last thing is for those that have not been able to write down their yearly goals. All right? Now we are saying, najua umevunjwa roho, najua umekuwa character developed, but give it one more shot. Try again. Like the disciple, like Peter, try again. Try again. Believe in God. Write it down. I find there's a lot of power when you write down your goals. And number two, when you share them and speak them. When you speak them, there is power. They come into life. One of the greatest goals for my year, I'll share this as a prayer item, and so that it is a far-fetched idea. So last year, of course, we had Christmas, and it was nice in its own way and everything else. But when I was celebrating, an idea came to me, or I would say the Lord spoke to me, all right? And I thought, I thought of a crazy idea. Let me just save the long story short, is that I thought of taking my family for a holiday this year, all right? And that is one of the prayers that I have. Do I have the money again? When I did the budget again, long story short, siku rahisi bwana. But I remember asking God, I'm going to trust in you. I'm going to look up to you to fulfill this. And one of the ways, again, I as I'm sharing, is when I made that prayer, of course, I didn't know what was going to happen. But over the month of January, those that know, I have tent making business, which is baking. By the way, I keki to stop concert to, all right? So one of the my tent making, whatever is baking. And the year began with a bang. I got a corporate company that came and said, we are doing customer appreciation week. Tunataka cupcakes. Cupcakes, how hard can that be? Wow. Yes. Delivering like 300 cupcakes. Those that have been following my status, wanajua, if you know, you know. Zinasonga tu. Alex and Rana, nime-employ watu. Because, hey, siku rahisi. But I'm sharing that because it is one of the ways that I'm trusting God to provide for my goal at the end of the year. Because I have not even told my family because I don't want to excite them first. Stucky pressure. The last time I excited them with rite of passage, it was not good. So now, this time we're doing it different. So the same thing is go and try again. But as you do that, the fourth point is remember that the battle is the Lord's. And just like David with Goliath, when we face giants in our lives, we can take courage knowing that God fights for us and he will bring victory. That when the victory comes, we'll point back to God. As I've shared all the stories that I'm sharing, again, it's not to share so that I brag, but it is just to point back to the victory that God has given me, because I look back and I can only see God. I can only see God. So we need to launch. The challenge that I'm bringing to us is we need to launch into the deep. Turn to your neighbor now. I know I've tried to resist, but now I can't. Turn to your neighbor and tell them, let's launch into the deep. And watch God to do the impossible. So maybe even as I request us to be on our feet, to just have a time of prayer and reflection, you can just stand on your feet. I think we can just take some time and ask God to give us faith. Because sometimes we can listen to nice sermons and nice teachings, be excited in the moment, but after that, we go back to our lives and we go back to the normal. But God is saying to us this day, trust me,